Hello and welcome to Breaking the Cycle. My name is Dr. Alan Hyde, and today we're joined by a familiar friend who has been on the show before and had a wonderful conversation about domestic partner violence the last time she was here. I'll share Breaking the Cycle Radio is not just a podcast you can find on Thursday afternoons, but we also have a practice here in Hurst, Texas. If you relate to any of the information that we talk about on this show, do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. We will also have our guest's information in the description below for you to reach out to her. But without any further ado, today we are joined by Dr. Alicia Hawley-Bernardez. Welcome back.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah. How's everything been going?
Everything's been great. I think when we spoke last, I was kind of just getting started. I feel like I was just getting my legs under me, my feet under me, and now things are rocking and rolling. So things are great.
Yeah. Our conversation, so we talked about a few things, but our conversation that led into domestic partner violence and some of your descriptions of those dynamics, people really related to. And really latched onto. It got some real traction. And so I think maybe a return to that discussion as well as just some of the things that you're working on. And we'll talk about the group that you're going to be running for survivors of maybe something that we would call narcissistic personality disorder. We'll get into all these kind of things today.
Yeah. Awesome. That sounds great.
Yeah. Do you want to start anywhere specific? Do you want to get into just kind of like defining again, just for those listening, what domestic partner violence is?
Yeah. I would define it as verbal, emotional, physical abuse by a current or former partner or spouse. And that is primarily the population that I work with whenever I see individual clients. And one of the things that I'm hearing and I'm seeing a lot more of is just really understanding the emotional abuse and the emotional manipulation piece. That a lot of people, when they hear domestic violence or when they hear intimate partner violence, either one of those terms, they don't immediately think of themselves because they're not being physically hit. They're not being, physically beaten in any way. They don't have bruises. They don't have broken bones. And so they immediately think, well, that's not me. And a large portion of my caseload are actually clients who have experienced the emotional abuse piece. And the emotional abuse, a lot of people that I work with and that I have seen might argue that the emotional piece is longer lasting and worse, can be worse than physical violence because it stays with you for such a longer period of time in terms of impacting your self-esteem, your self-worth, impacting your ability to make decisions and feel like you aren't going crazy kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say so too, especially because a lot of times, and not every time, but I would say there's a fair amount of discussion around a pull towards familiarity, right? So there's often a generational aspect to things like emotional abuse. It's unresolved dynamics that we're familiar with from family of origin or like extended family outside of your nuclear family that have persisted and that we're used to and that we allow without boundaries.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll say to people, you don't necessarily have to come from a family who has experienced abuse to be either a perpetrator or a victim of abuse. But it is certainly a risk factor. And I think, that's certainly something that we talk about in my groups and that I talk about in individual therapy as well.
Yeah, it's not, one of the ways I was talking with a client the other day is that cliche of like correlation is not causation, but it is worth exploring.
Absolutely.
Sometimes things are much more on the nose, whereas other things are just dynamics that we've picked up and learned to become comfortable with ourselves in our adult lives. And I think for men, this is a big one. Just kind of speaking from this perspective is like, we're taught a lot of times, not just in like from our father figures or male figures, but societally, that the repair side of our emotional connections with people, like coming back to a place of vulnerability, is a weakness. I can't tell you how many times I've faced down that barrel with male clients
Yeah.
in my years as a therapist, of being vulnerable and tender with the people in your life is not weakness.
Right.
This is connection.
Yeah.
And the more connected you are, actually, the stronger you're going to be in your community.
Yeah, I think that vulnerability piece is really interesting, because when I talk about it with women and with, you know, victims or survivors of abuse, they also struggle with that vulnerability piece, because not because they think in general like it's a weakness, but because when they have been vulnerable, it has been used against them, or it's like a weapon or a tactic that's used to manipulate them further. And so it can be very hard for them to be vulnerable.
Isn't it interesting too? Because like I know, as you and I would kind of unpack and share about it, it's like what a common report you would get on both sides in two different ways.
Yeah.
I've heard so many men share the same sentiment of like, well, I don't open up because it's going to be used as ammunition. And I think an ultimate point there for those kind of listening along with us is that, yes, human beings, when they're not in a healthy place, are looking for information to use against you, either for manipulation or for abuse, or just to fulfill whatever kind of dynamic they need. Or I guess a better way to put that is that they want and they think they need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. I think also I talk about this a lot in terms of if they're asking me about couples therapy, and I am always advocating and saying that couples therapy, anytime that there is abuse or a power and control dynamic, is not ever healthy. Because in a therapeutic relationship, there is supposed to be safety. There's supposed to be support. And so what happens when there's abuse involved is it creates this false sense of safety. It opens and allows them to be vulnerable. And then in abusive relationships, that vulnerability is used against them later on. And so it creates a false sense of safety for them to open up in a couples therapy, which is what you want. You want that. But in abusive relationships, that is then manipulated and used against them later on.
Yeah. And I think it's very relatable, because I think even well-intentioned, balanced people working towards health have a tendency to fall into human behavior around these situations, where I remember when I first started to really commit into therapy, and I don't mean even just as a professional, because like I didn't commit to my own individual therapist until I had been one for a while. And then hearing some of the reflections of not being so hard on myself for certain dynamics that looked like some of these things because of the dynamics I grew up in. All right. So, I grew up around the family disease of addiction, and all the codependency, abandonment, neglect, really kind of, as I look back, like severe stuff that kept me up at night in my early 20s, and I'd have these dynamics in my relationships where like, I really do care, but I kept missing the connection. Right. And so I didn't want to use information against my female counterpart, but I couldn't help myself but to use it to keep people at an arm's distance. And then hearing the reflections back to me that like, if you follow down that path, this only gets worse. It doesn't get better. You need support. This is where I always hold up for men, is like, the mistakes that you make are opportunities to repair, to clean it up, not just with your female counterparts, but with the people in your life that need you to be responsible. It doesn't make you a monster. It just means you're capable of being one. And if you can look at it, right, and this is the same, right, for our female counterparts, if you can look at it, now we can build a foundation of respect.
Yeah.
Right, honesty, trust.
And a large part of that repair, what I talk with my survivors about is actions, because oftentimes that they will perpetrators will have words like, I'm going to go to therapy, I'm going to change, I want to change, and they may desperately want to change. I understand that. And that they hear that repair piece. The problem is, at least with a lot of the victims that I work with, there's no follow through, there's no follow up in terms of actions, taking actions around some of that repair work. The other thing that while you were talking made me think about was some of the EMDR work that I have done. And really getting to the root of like what, for perpetrators or for victims, right? What is the root negative belief that they have about themselves if they do repair or if they don't repair? What does that mean about them? What is their internal voice saying? That's one of my favorite questions to ask.
Right.
To understand kind of what they feel like that says about them as a person.
And there's so many areas with this one. And I think this is why the conversation did so well last time in its reception, is because most, if not all, people listening to something like this can relate, have either experienced it, have done it, in the way of like perpetrating, violating boundaries. We're human beings. We step on each other's toes, and sometimes that can go really far. But as we kind of double click into some of these things, I think about, an aspect of emotional violations and abuse being very subtle in the way that you're describing it. That, let's just use a man as an example, right? Because I have experience clinically with it and a lived experience of taking action into a place of recovery, which is the piece you were saying is, if you're not taking the action steps, nothing changes if nothing changes. And that doesn't make you inherently a monster, but it may mean that you're hurting people pretty bad. And I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Some of them don't deserve it, most do, which is that they don't want to be harming people. And I heard that in what you were sharing. But they may not have enough awareness, which then would predicate acceptance of their issues to then take action. And one of the ways I like put it, let's say I'm working with a family member of an alcoholic. One way I put it is like, imagine someone who's been struggling with addiction for years and just running amok and making a mess and hurting people, to then have to sit with the truth. For some people, it would kill them. So they won't do it.
Well, in situations with victims of abuse, a lot of times it's power and control that they have, and oftentimes they don't want to give up that power and that control. There's little to no consequences for it, so why would they? And so when they realize, I may have said this the last time, I don't know, when they realize that they are
Turn that one back.
when they realize they are losing that power and control, or that it's slipping, that's when it can become more dangerous. That's when women are trying to leave abusive relationships, or people are trying to leave abusive relationships. That is when it's the most dangerous for them, because the perpetrator is recognizing that they're losing that power and they're losing that control, and sitting with recognizing, this is what I'm wanting. I'm wanting power and control, and overcoming that and trying to repair it by making behavior changes is not something that a lot of people are willing or wanting to do.
It's a lot of work. Yeah, on both sides.
Yes.
It's like, because the perpetrator and the perpetrated both are struggling with a control dynamic. I think in some senses, and I'm sure you would fully agree with this, is it's the presentation of the one up, one down. And at any point we can be in the one down position. And what I share with my clients is remembering that the one down position is where the power is. If I get to be the victim, I get to call the shots, because at any point I can knock you off your pedestal. Right. And so it's that dangerous shift, because in that shift of knocking someone off the pedestal, it's like, think about toddlers when they throw a tantrum, siblings. If one were to knock the other off a pedestal, there's going to be fists thrown, right? And adults are no different. We just present it differently. Some get physical, some get verbal, some use emotional manipulation tactics, but everybody is trying to be in that victim position. Well, you did this to me. How dare you, right? And now we're in the cycle of abuse.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the emotional abuse and manipulation, I mean, it's things like name calling. It's not fighting fair. It's throwing things back in their face. It's telling them that they're worthless. It's telling them that they are a terrible mother. It's telling them that they don't deserve X, Y, or Z. And when it's said to you, when those things are said to you, I mean, first of all, that's incredibly hurtful for anyone to hear, but especially if it's said to you by the person who is supposed to love you the most, it can do significant damage to your self-esteem long term. And so I think that is a lot of what I am working on with survivors is breaking that down and looking at what was said, what was done. And again, the emotional abuse and manipulation can take years to kind of break apart and understand how that all happened.
Yeah.
Fun stuff.
Yeah,
Right? No.
I think would be worth for those listening to us to just kind of hear examples. And so I'll kind of toss some questions out and see as we go. It's like, let's give some examples of what it might look like when someone is escalating into prepping to throw something back in your face. We've kind of teased in the conversation a little bit of that, but what are some of the ways that looks like in practicality?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I'm always kind of aware of when I'm working with survivors is kind of where are they in this cycle of abuse, right? And so are they in this honeymoon phase? Are they walking on eggshells? Did they just have a big explosive incident? For example, I was working with a client a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about how things were great. They just went on a trip. It went really well. Things have been relatively calm. And in the back of my head, I didn't say this out loud, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking, okay, when is the other shoe going to drop? And they'll, survivors have said that to me multiple times. And lo and behold, the very next week, I get an email that's saying they're threatening to kick me out. They're going to throw all my stuff in the front yard. They're going to take the children away, kind of thing. And so it's and survivors are very good at knowing kind of when that other shoe is going to drop.
Yeah, it's anticipatory for sure for survival.
Exactly. And I talk about that, and your nervous system is so activated that you're constantly in fight or flight because it's a survival tactic. You have to be in order to stay safe. So that's, one example of like really talking with them and kind of figuring out where they are in this cycle or where they feel like. I also always will trust and tell survivors to trust their instincts. They know their situations the best. They know their safety the best. And I will always defer to them in kind of where they think things are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I have no problem sharing this. I don't want to out too much of anonymity stuff. My brother is an alcoholic, my older brother, right? So it's like you grow up with somebody who you look up to, right? And then you're let down in more ways than you could imagine that are hurtful in ways that you couldn't fathom because, your siblings are people that just you love on another level. And one of the ways that are perpetuated by witnessing like the enmeshment that him and my mom had was that I was always trying to get into dynamics to fix that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I had a real tendency to put myself in the being perpetrated position with women who had addictions. That was my early dating career, right? And I remember when I got with my therapist, who's like a 30-year recovery person, and she would highlight that, like, trust your gut. You know, you're a respected clinician. You see these things every day. And in your personal life, the disconnect, right? And I like to highlight that for my clients too, is like, I'll often tell my clients when they're coming in new and we're talking about this stuff, is like, I was a licensed therapist at the point of like 6-7 years before I really understood. I do know. I do know that when she sneaks off into the bathroom and I can hear her throwing up, that probably is an eating disorder, but I'm lying to myself about it, like, oh, well,
Making
maybe
excuses.
maybe the pizza really did give her a stomach ache. It's like, okay, well, you know, pizza doesn't just do that, right? And not every restaurant, they would be shut down for health violations and health codes if their pizza was doing that, right? So, you know, those things where I would know in my gut of like, I'm replaying some kind of pattern here. Why am I trying to help, fix, and save? Why am I sticking around through the violations, right? And not even, this was something too of like just the grace for humans is like, why am I willing to stick around and tolerate when someone isn't even willing to not violate themselves? That was a hard pill to swallow, that we can't help and save people. We have to give them the dignity to sink.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of my, my clients that I work with really struggle with that because it's the person that you love the most in the world. And watching watching your brother, I imagine struggle was incredibly hard, and you want to help them and you believe them when they say they're going to change. And you want to believe them. And oftentimes the other thing that I talk with them about is recognizing the red flags early on. So in my group, we just talked about this past week, is like, when was the first moment that you remember thinking, something's not right? You know, alarm bells are kind of going off. And we talked about that, and we talked about what that moment looked like for them and what would have been different if they had acted then, when those alarm bells were going off, kind of thing. Not to get too theoretical on you, but I also talked about the trans-theoretical model of change, which you might know about with addiction stuff, right? Before anyone wants to make a change in their life, you have pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance. And so my dissertation was talking about women leaving abusive relationships, and when they decided to make that change, what were they at in the relationship, and then what was it like for them to go through those stages to leave the abusive relationship. And so we talked about those stages of change, and you know, contemplating and doing some preparation work before leaving can be really helpful for their safety. And
I was going to say, that's where seeking safety comes in. You'll hear that term a lot in these realms, but that's the contemplation phase where you're really setting the foundations to get out effectively without harming.
And that's what I'm doing primarily with a lot of my clients that I'm working with, is we're in this contemplation preparation phase where I'm really helping them prepare what it's going to be like day in and day out once they've left, what it's going to be like for them to be able to leave. Many of them feel too weak, feel like they can't do it. They don't have the strength to be able to do it. And so helping them overcome that negative belief, whether through CBT or EMDR. But that's a lot of the work that I'm doing with several of my clients.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the downward spiral. So like when we look at those phases, this is how we would look at it in like the positive structured growth aspect. And underneath that is kind of like where I would, even kind of humorously talk about it with clients. Right underneath that is our downward spiral into death and insanity. And there it is right there. And a big one too in our phase from pre-contemplation to maintenance is like, well, what do we do and this is with any addiction, is what do we do when we get into our maintenance phases and now euphoric recall has set in and you're longing for the way things used to be? What do you do then when you know that your life is better, it feels better, things have been going better, all the cues and all the information and feedback is better, but this rotten, awful thing that you used to be familiar with, you're thinking about romantically and euphorically, right? It's human beings are very tricky in this way, but it can sound complicated, but it's very simple, right? The euphoric recall isn't real. That's the dopamine that's getting set off, and then challenging that to not act out.
Yeah. The way that I talk with clients about this, and again, it's so funny how much overlap there is with addictions, is the urge surfing, right? And like riding the wave. Yeah, right. Riding that wave of like the urge to get back together with them, or riding the wave of the urge to drink again or whatever. And know that euphoria, that wave is temporary. And kind of riding that through until it's no longer there. Have you know about the urge surfing wave with addictions? So
euphoric recall is the term we use in those realms, but it's the same concept.
Right.
And here's a generic thought as we're talking that, like, you just never know what pieces are going to come up and obviously overlap, but it's like, we deal with a lot, and most of my caseload are the family members of alcoholics. That's my lived experience. It's what I found a niche in. I not just clinically understand it and researched it in my dissertation, but I lived it. And one of the aspects there when we're talking about emotional abuse is the very real lived experience that you're talking about when your loved one is abusing you emotionally through their abandonment of you and neglect and abandonment of themselves and others. And so all this work starts to, in the family disease of addiction, look very much like the cycle of abuse, because it is. And that's a big one, like in the groups in the realms of Al-Anon, right, for the friends and family members. When you look at the 12-step process in there and the skills and the mantras and the coping strategies there, it's all about breaking down those cycles of abuse. That is what is happening, and you're surrounded by people who are doing that consistently.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. I think that that's, again, there's so much kind of overlap between that. And then also just like, I think a lot of the survivors, while you were talking, I was thinking about, there's a lot of survivors who they know that is, their partner, the perpetrator, has those abandonment issues, has that history of, abuse growing up or addiction growing up. And so they feel guilty leaving or wanting to leave the abusive relationship because they know, or they blame it on that. And I have to oftentimes challenge them and say that, if that is part of the problem, they need to want help, and they need to want to change that for themselves, and you can't do that for them.
Right. Well, this is a big one I've always joked about in my career, is like the amount of times in my career as a male therapist that I will get the call from the female partner. And I've heard it all, man, from like, I think my partner has autism, to like, he really wants to do the work, but he wanted me to make the call. I've heard it all. I've heard the gambit. None of it works. Every once in a blue moon, the man will come stumbling in a place of self-pity, right? And we may be able, rock bottom. And that's the key, right? It's like, anytime a man, even if their female partner started the initiated conversation, the only way we ever get anywhere is if he's at rock bottom. If he's still got wiggle room, we're screwed. Right? And I can't tell you how many conversations, because like, look, I'm not going to turn anyone away that may fit into the process of where I can, at least have a conversation. But most of those are consultations. I'll do a 15-minute consultation. I'm like, look, brother, it just doesn't sound like you're ready. I'm not going to take your money if you're not going to do the work to get better. Period.
If there's any element of denial, if there's any element of not recognizing responsibility. Yeah.
And then, that's also male and female. In therapy, that's the process of avoiding blown smoke up your ass, right? Because there's also a fair amount of times like, man, I really like what you're sharing. I'm really ready to do the work. And you never hear from them again, which is, that's fine.
Yeah.
All right. But it really does highlight what you were touching on earlier of how hard this work is. And when it's actually presented by someone who understands it, those are like, oh shit moments.
That's so funny because I have the almost exact same thing happen with survivors too. If they're not ready to start counseling or start thinking about it, right? I'll usually hear from them and then not hear anything, or they won't want to follow through. They're not ready. They're not fully ready to do the contemplating. And I tell everybody that I work with, and I will always support what you want to do. Now, addictions, your perspective is going to be a little different because mine is they're not actively drinking or necessarily doing anything that might be self-harming. But I will say, if you stay in the relationship, if you want to leave the relationship, if you've already left the relationship, if you go back to the relationship, I am here for you. So coming at it from a place of complete non-judgmental approach has been very effective in working with a lot of the clients that I do, because they may go back. And that is often when friends and family give up on them.
Oh, cut ties.
And they're like, nope, you're not listening to me. You're not doing what I think you should do. And that's honestly when they usually need help the most. Yeah. And so I tell them very early on, like, whatever, whatever you want to do, we'll walk through it together and we'll figure it out together, kind of thing. So that's usually the approach I take.
Which I respect. I always sit with, and it's in my work, it's an interesting dichotomy in my mind, because I know in my understanding intellectually, but in my heart of hearts, if somebody is struggling with an unmanageable addiction, the most helpful, compassionate, loving thing I can do for them is tell them to get in the rooms before you do this work. Yeah. And that's meeting them where they're at. They know it and I know it. Now what we're up against is the 1 in 10. 1 out of 10 will do it and 9 will fail. Wow. That's what we are looking down with 12-step. Yeah. But then there's this aspect, right, of like continually meeting a client where they're at. And I'll share this. It's like in the thread that you were sharing of like, when everybody else walks away from you, I will stand there with you. And what I found is the 1 in 10 who want to get sober, same as I would imagine the 1 in 10 who want to stop destructive, abusive behaviors, it's going to progress without support and it's going to kill them. The stress of being an abuser will kill you, or you'll throw your life away and it's all done. Right? And addiction will kill you and steal your life away and it's all done. And the ones who commit, when you meet them there and stop lying to them. I tell people all the time when they're trying to come in for sessions, I am not going to lie to you. Yeah. I'm going to tell you the truth that what you're doing is not a great idea and it's going to ruin your life. Maybe no one's told you that. Maybe they have. But I'm going to be very straight up with you that I'm not just going to work with you if you're not willing to do this, because same with the abuser, where you can never be sure if they're actually going to stop the behavior. With the alcoholic, I can't be sure that you're not going to stop drinking until I know that you're in those rooms and committing to the steps. And you're sober. You may not like it, right? I don't get. I just don't care. I don't have this the margin to care. If you're throwing your life away,
I'm not going to care more than you are.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And I think the difference for me with survivors is that is the opportunity for me to do safety planning with them. Right. That is the opportunity that I have where I could help them to be safer when they're leaving, or safer when they're in the relationship. So it's interesting.
Well, and it's, there's an aspect of it as well, like in the therapeutic setting, because we talk about this in the rooms as well. Let's say when the alcoholic comes in, they get sober, the real work begins. It was never about the substance. It was always the underlying symptoms underneath of shame, abuse, neglect, and abandonment, and getting to those roots so you're not squirming in all these symptoms anymore. Then these realms is where the real work happens, right? So oftentimes the survivor is the codependent, right? Where then the alcoholic has to stop drinking to realize they're the codependent, right? So there's this like real, you have to save their life first. let me reframe that. They have
Yeah.
to save their life
Yeah.
first for us to do any life-saving work. And with the survivor of abuse, they're already there, right?
Yeah.
They're already facing down the barrel of like, this is the real work, and I'm either going to safety plan or I'm going to stay stuck in a pattern of misery.
Right.
And so therapy oftentimes is that kind of bastion of hope where eventually it is for the addict, but they have to say they have to stop being a numbskull first.
Yeah.
It's really it. That's
Right.
really it.
Yeah. I think the thing that really resonated with a lot of people the last time I was here was talking about how oftentimes survivors will say, well, he only gets like this when he's drunk, or, well, he only gets like this when he's mad, kind of thing. And I push back and I say, okay, I hear what you're saying. But when he goes out drinking with his friends, does he hit them? Does he, verbally abuse them? And usually the answer is no. I always preface it by saying, there are belligerent drunks who do act like that. And the same argument can be made about anger management. They just need anger management. Well, when he's angry at his boss, does he go off on his boss? When he's angry at, the grocery store, does he go off at someone at the grocery store? Usually the answer is no, which means it's a conscious choice. No matter how much they've been drinking, no matter how angry or how mad they are, it's a conscious choice that they are making not to hit their friend and to hit or emotionally abuse them.
Yeah.
And so that I think was really, that's always really powerful for survivors to hear because they haven't thought about it from that perspective.
And it's an important one too, because like, even when somebody's blacked out, that's a whole nother conversation entirely with
Right.
alcohol.
Yeah.
But that person's on a track to becoming blacked out, and they've already been behaving in ways as they get there, and they are conscious in the choices that they're
Right.
making, however inebriated. And that, right, I could imagine for people is a very reassuring thing to hear. And I talk a lot with the family members of alcoholics about that. Is like the part that is, I guess you could make the argument for unconsciousness when it comes to substances is the disease model aspect of like, they may not have a lot of control and decision making around whether or not they pick up the drink, but where they do have control over is how they choose to treat you.
Yep.
And if they are treating you poorly, you do not have to tolerate it,
Right.
period. You can find grace and love. And this is where I found it in my heart is I can find grace and love for somebody who can't stop picking up the bottle to fill a void. What I can no longer do is allow that person to treat me poorly.
Yes.
And the moment they're ready to not, I'll embrace it.
Right.
If they can't do that, I'm not tolerating it.
And again, that repair is more than just words. The moment they're ready to to repair with actions, is the big key aspect to a lot of this.
Yeah. I think really just kind of that aspect today we keep circling back to is like, what are you willing to do about it? If you're not willing to do anything about it, we're going to stay in that pattern. The lights are getting to me. Maybe that, or I'm emotionally discussing this.
Yeah.
Could be both.
Yeah, a little bit. And a lot of what I'm seeing, again, a lot more of is just people who think that what they are experiencing is not, domestic violence. It's not intimate partner violence because it's just emotional. It's just words. It's just verbal. He hasn't hit me. He hasn't put his hands on me. But in my realm and the work that I do, that is can be just as damaging for so many people.
Yeah. Well, and it's far more common is maybe the way I would
absolutely.
want to say it. The emotional tactics, you're not going to see really anyone ever getting legal consequences for something like that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You may get separated if it got real bad and voices were raised and people made noise complaints and things like that. The cops may come out, but you're not going to typically get detained for those kind of things. And so there is no recourse
Right.
in our society. And that's a tricky conversation because it's like, are you really sure you would want there to be? Because now all of a sudden, if you open that conversation, your rights are going to get infringed upon before they ever solve the actual problem. So it's really, really tricky.
Yep.
But the simplicity of it is what we've been talking about, which is if you can make some decisions for yourself to detach and protect yourself with boundaries that maybe were never shown to you, that's where the healing is. That's where the improvements are.
Absolutely.
And you can't wait for the perpetrator to do it. They're not going to do it. That's the part we can dispel today. Just sitting down with someone who's researched this directly. The perpetrator is not going to do it. You cannot hold your breath and wait. It's not going to happen.
And you can't do it for them.
Right.
That's the other thing too, is like they're waiting for them to schedule a therapy appointment. Well, I just scheduled it for him, or yeah, that's not going to work either. They have to want it. They have to want to make that change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. When did you schedule?
Yeah. Right.
Oh, I totally wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Right. I bet you did.
Yeah. All of that.
Yeah, I've kind of stopped. Well, I did a long time ago, but like when someone calls in, and I've instructed my clinicians on this one too, is like when someone calls in and they want to book for a partner or even a child, let's get them on the phone.
Yep.
I'm not booking anything for you until I've talked to whoever you think is the identified
Whoever
patient.
is going to be the client, right?
Yeah. It's like I need to, as the professional, determine if they are the identified patient.
Right.
But what I also remind those clients is like, it's interesting because you're the one who picked up the phone. Are you seeing and talking to anybody? That conversation happens a lot.
Yeah.
And then the tears, right? No. Like, do you want to?
Yeah, that's why, I mean, anytime I see people recommending couples counseling where there's power and control or abuse dynamics, I always say that's not a great option. But individual therapy for each person sounds like a good starting point.
And I kind of figured, just talking to you and having this as a second sit down, that would be your sentiment. It's the same sentiment I hold to. Like I had a client recently that was asking me, like, do you think it'd be helpful if my wife came in? Because we had brought her in for just kind of like a collateral session. Let me hear her perspective. And right off the bat, it was, I'm going to recommend that you go and do your own individual sessions. And then it's been a couple months since we did that. And he's like, do you think like a return to that and some couple sessions would be good? And I was very firm with him of like, look, you know, if she's not doing her individual sessions, I am not bringing her back in here. I got the collateral information I needed. You know?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's not a, you know, this is one thing too, in like any relationship dynamic, it's not a knock on any one person. It's that if you want the dynamic, one of the best ways I always like to explain to me is like, we are two ships passing in the night in complete and total darkness until we've done the work. And we will keep missing each other and missing each other and missing each other until we crash into each other if we do not turn the lights on. The problem with that is that I can't come over to your ship. We're in total darkness. I'm not getting and jumping into the sea to try to come turn your lights on. You have to do it. And I have to do it. Now, there's also the very real reality that you were touching on is if I turn my lights on and you don't, well, underneath that, and this is for like emotional abuse, underneath that is the instant threat of violence.
Yeah.
Right? Why aren't you turning your lights on too? It is an instant recognition. And most people miss that because it's hard to look and say like, I'm working on myself, but they're not. And then to admit to yourself that that is an instant threat of violence, right? That's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and to want to change and want to do the work, but the other person not be reciprocal to that is, I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's very hard.
Yeah. I think one way, I was talking with a young lady about this one, is like, imagine just for a moment, you're in an abandoned building.
Yep.
And you can hear somebody there. And so you turn on your flashlight and you're calling out and you don't hear anything. I tell you, I don't know about you, but my stomach's going to drop to my butthole instantly. What is going on here?
Yep.
Yeah. And that's what it's like with emotional abuse, is like that sinking feeling of like this, like you were saying with catching red flags, this doesn't feel right.
Yep.
and then trusting them.
Yeah.
What would you say, we can go with the perspective of a young lady, since I feel like that's going to be the most relatable hearing it come from you. But what would you maybe say to a young lady? They have that moment of recognizing that they're in the pitch dark, abandoned house, and they feel that red flag come up. What would you say to them about them then taking the action to leave and grounding themselves in that doesn't mean that they're never going to be able to find loving partnership?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would want to challenge that negative belief and, just say, where did that negative belief come from? Right? What makes you believe that? When was the first time you believed that? And what's underneath that, right? Is it you're never going to find another partner? Is it I'm unlovable? Is it I'm not good enough? Is it I'm weak? Is it I'm vulnerable, right? Like what's kind of underneath that, instead of just like, oh, I'm not going to find another partner. Let's go dig a little deeper behind that. What makes you think that? What makes you say that? Is kind of what I would, how I would challenge them a little bit. And then also, just have them think through what they want in life. So many of the survivors that I work with, even in the relationship, feel incredibly alone, incredibly isolated. And it's like, okay, do you want to be in the relationship alone and isolated and being victimized? Or do you want to be not victimized, and alone? And so it's, pick your poison too, to some extent.
Yeah, and understand, right, what's occurring, like you said in the beginning, what's happening to us, right, and all of this, and that embracing that leads to your growth.
Yeah.
Because what I'll share too on that kind of example of like men who do these things, right? If we just look at a traditional heterosexual kind of breakdown, man and woman, men who engage in these dynamics, and I'll speak directly to you, are the biggest wuss balls I've ever met in my entire life when it comes to just sitting with emotions. But more importantly than that, men, you're the biggest wusses in the sense of connecting with your communities and being of value through responsibility and accountability. It is a reoccurring issue in men who are abusive, is that they will then completely isolate themselves, right, and not be of value to their community, which is about the weakest thing you could probably do. But what I would also then share to the women who are in that abandoned house with the lights turned off and you're scared because you can hear him over there, is that as soon as you choose to leave that house, that weenie of a dude is going to be sitting in whatever dark room crying the moment you leave, because he was terrified of abandonment. Because underneath all of those abusive behaviors, and I'm sure you can agree with this, is a little boy who's fucking terrified. Way more terrified than the woman who's going through it. Some of those women are brutally tough, brutally tough.
Yes.
When I sit with them, I'm like, God damn, you're vicious. I mean, this guy doesn't stand a chance against you.
And I think that in the group that I'm facilitating, a lot of them are recognizing how incredibly empathetic they can be and empathetic they are. And so that's part of the reason why many of them don't leave, is because they understand that that's a scared boy going to be crying, who's going to be crying. And they don't want to abandon them. They don't want to leave them. But they also know that this is not healthy. This is not safe. This is not what they want either. Yeah.
And a big part of that is like what anybody would pick up there and then build with awareness is, we can't mother people. We can't manage people. You can't manipulate people, right? You've got to get yourself into your own hula hoop, right? Yeah. It's like we're talking with people about boundaries and communicating just like your observations and relaying your emotional experiences and being clear and concise. You cannot afford to be concerned with the way that another adult emotionally experiences your boundary, because that's not what the boundary is about. And the moment that you concern yourself with it, it's no longer a boundary.
Yeah. One of the clients that I'm working with, there's significant kind of abuse and manipulation, narcissistic tendencies from their parent. And I was talking with her about boundaries, and I was talking about how setting a boundary is not building a wall. Setting a boundary is building a door where you decide what comes in and what doesn't. It's, right now it's a free for all. Anybody can come into the house kind of thing. And I think a lot of what she was envisioning when we were talking about boundaries is that she puts up this wall and they go no contact and, they don't have any communication. And I said, well, I want to challenge that a little bit to say, like, I want you to think about it more like you're building a door and you get to decide who comes in. If they're not screaming at you and yelling and crazy, I wouldn't let them in. But if they can have a calm, rational conversation, then you can open the door and you can let them in. So she said that was really eye-opening for her to think about it from that perspective as well.
Yeah, it reminds me of there's this one book on narcissistic parents that uses the framework of the Wizard of Oz. And in the sense of like building doors, on the flip side of it, when someone is building what they would present to you as a door, but is actually a very heavily guarded wall, right? Like the Wizard of Oz. It is a very regulated and heavily governmentally regulated entrance, right?
Yes.
And that's the narcissist, right? Only what comes in is what confirms my reality, not yours, to the point where you will gaslight yourself into believing that I can provide everything for you.
Yep.
And that's, one way to spot the narcissist. Is everything curated to that person's reality with no margin for your own.
Right.
And I think a lot of people had parents like that. I think there are whole generations that were like that. I'm not here to knock some of those older generations, but I will say, without getting any type of political, is like we pay the prices today for some of those generational choices that were very narcissistic. No harm, no foul, whatever. Right. But even societally, we can see it, right? It either confirms the reality we wanted or get out of my way. And it's just like, well, generations who don't want to live that way are paying the price for not wanting to live that way.
Right.
And that's the same dynamic that occurs in relationships.
And a lot of survivors that I'm working with too are they're with covert narcissists. And so they have friends and family members who they're like, they would never believe me if I tell them this is my reality or this is what's happening, because he's so charming. He's so, out there, charismatic kind of thing. And that's, the covert narcissism that they're experiencing as well is pretty significant.
And I think we might have talked about that one last time, and I know we've talked about it on the show, where charisma is kind of one of those soft assessments for cluster B type of personality disorders, namely narcissism. Heavily charismatic people, oftentimes that becomes very unpredictable, it becomes very unmanageable, very chaotic, because that's a show. Right. Where I want to see charisma is when I turn on the television and watch a show. That's where I want to see charisma. Yeah. When I'm networking with people and connecting with people, I want to see friendliness and connection. But if someone's like ultra charismatic, it's like eating too much chocolate cake. It's like, oh, dude, let's come off of it just a touch. Right? Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying.
Right. And that authenticity is kind of what I'm looking for anybody to have some, authenticity or even some moments of vulnerability, right? Too. I think that to me is can be very helpful.
Yeah. And this is another aspect too of like what I always experienced, like intact, healthy groups of men are really good at sussing these things out. I played baseball for 19 years, and these kind of guys always got sussed out. We're like, bro, what is up with so-and-so, And so like that's, let's say I'm like working with a family member of alcoholics and they get into like a mixed gender meeting in Al-Anon where the boundaries can be real healthy, and they get around some healthy men, right? Let's say it's a female, they get around some healthy men who don't tolerate that kind of stuff. You get to see this other aspect of like when healthy men come together and don't tolerate those types of behaviors, that guy doesn't last in groups of men. They don't even last in unhealthy groups of men, but they certainly don't last in an intact healthy group of men,
Yeah.
they get outed very quickly as cancerous.
Wow.
And I've always appreciated that aspect
Yeah.
in my manhood of like when I connect with healthy men who are growth minded and taking care of themselves. Typically for me, it's, you know, in line with some spirituality, these kind of things. When a dude comes in and tries to shake it up and is like kind of in some of these abusive type of patterns and really manipulative, they get sussed out real quick. And if you've never seen it in a group of men, it's fun to watch because it's very respectful, but it's very clear and it is firm.
Yeah.
All right. The group conscious kind of starts to happen instantly. And men aren't big talkers all the time. Right? So it's like you get the gist or you don't. Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's fun to watch. I like to get men that I work with involved in healthy groups of men for those purposes.
I love that.
Because if you're struggling to connect, men are going to tell you behaviorally, even as a man, and you either clean it up or ship out. And that's only going to be beneficial for our partners.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
You either clean it up or you ship out. And if you can own that, you'll be a much more desirable. It's like one of the prayers I use is, God, make me easy to love. You know, and the men who utilize things like that, wouldn't you know it, are easier to love.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
Yeah, but without it, we can already be hard to love.
Yeah.
You know, we're prickly sometimes. Yeah.
But if you have been raised, or if you've been taught, or if you've learned how to be emotionally available and emotionally in tune, and vulnerable, right? I think that speaks to a man's ability to have healthy relationships and have right, that social emotional learning kind of thing. So that's great.
Yeah, and I think it's always existed. I think people can get into a generational conversation of like, our ancestors didn't do this. Like they most certainly did, and we have philosophical texts that even point to the fact that they did. It's like that whole stoicism stuff, right? If you actually sit down, right? Because I remember working with young men, they all wanted to be Marcus Aurelius, right? But when you actually read the entries philosophically, that is a man who was actually very tender to the people who needed tenderness. He was not just this cut off stoic person, right? Very introspective. So that's always been an aspect for men that gets missed.
Yeah, there's this hyper toxic masculinity that's sometimes focused in our society. So interesting.
Well, it's more sexy, right? That it sells. People men who are misguided love that stuff, right? And so I'm not even going to get too up in arms about it, other than we know it doesn't work, and then anybody who follows that trail too far, there are consequences.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Any last sentiments that you would have for those who've been following along with us today?
Yeah, I think my biggest thing that I always say to survivors is to trust your instincts. And when that your gut drops and you kind of have that aha moment, really do some digging into what's keeping you from leaving in that moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Of course. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Awesome.
Dr. Alicia Hawley-Bernardez. You can find all of our information at breakingthepsychotherapy.com. We meet with guests here on our YouTube channel every Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're headed into the holidays. We have a few more guests this year, and then we will be picking it up in the new year. If you're looking for therapy, you can find all that information there, as well as when this video goes live and we link it onto our website, we will have a description section with Dr. Hawley-Bernardez's practice and information on how to find her. We hope to see you here next week when we bring on another guest. We love you. Take care.